Hey, good afternoon, K-Man. This is Dr. Wilton McDonald on vacation, but I just wanted to tune in to present episode 4, which is focusing on the Beachy Head Woman story as it's told by the BBC, and the color of Britain, color of Europe. And this is so timely because during this time of year, we're focused on the birth of Christ. And we see images, billions of images, which depict Christ, not as a black figure. Rightfully so, in Europe, we're getting stories and primary sources are coming out looking at the color and melanated color of Europe. So it is that the image of Christ has been portrayed as a white person. And there are different images all the time. Some curly hair, some uh, darker skin, but generally of fair skin, white complexion of Christ. And it's accepted by the mass. But little, and as I slowly, there is changing, an evolution taking place. But there's a pushback. And we could see in that BBC article of the Beachy Head Woman that she is now depicted as a white person. And that goes against the grain because they erase and have erased and trying to erase the African footprint in modern day Britain and in Europe. And we all know and accept, and scientists around the world, they agreed that Africa remains the birthplace. What we are short sighted of, it's the timeline. And if anyone gets just anything out of this whole series of GTR, it's the timeline from the reckoning James Ussher tried to put together. We can take the synoptic gospels and go through the genealogies and see that it's about 60 to 63 generations spanning Adam to Christ. We get a sense that, yes, the Bible points the way and allows us to map out this 4,000 year journey from Adam to Christ. And what is the problem? The major problem of the timeline, it's they pick up from the story from Christ to the present day because of the change of calendars. Jewish calendar, the Julian calendar, the Gregorian, because Gregory the Great, the first, appears that he was the 14th. And if you look at the list of popes, so 582 became 1582. The Dark Ages were never dark. They just, never truly existed. So we have a collapsed timeline in the Anno Domini, the AD after Christ, and that's the problem, the root of the problem, where we have to sort out in GTR. So I wanted to present this Beachy Head case, but first I wanted to play the intro, not the typical video, but in this case, the Morse quadrille, which I will play now to bring it at home as to the color of Europe.
Seen hidden in plain sight, yet rarely spoken, rarely taught. That makes you wonder, if this survived on the wall, what didn't survive in the books? So tonight, we bring the painting to life and let the kings speak for themselves.
Jestem Jerzy Dominik Lubomirski. Jestem czarnym księciem Europy. I am Prince Jerzy Dominik Lubomirski, a black prince of Europe. Ich bin Friedrich Vitzthum von Eckstedt, ein schwarzer Graf Europas.
I am Friedrich Vitzthum von Eckstedt, a black count of Europe.
Jag är Carl Gustav, son till Sveriges kung. I am Carl Gustav, son of the King of Sweden. I am a black baron.
Nazywali mnie Augustem II Mocnym, królem Polski i księciem Litwy.
They called me Augustus the Strong, King of Poland, Duke of Lithuania.
And I am a black man.
Welcome to the Moors Quadrille!
GTR Public.
Okay, so we've seen that. So we could go ahead to the video that just outlines the case of the Beachy Head Woman. So we're going to discuss this case about the color, the changing color of Britain. And we'll delve into the video right now.
First Black Britain known to us. An official blog post listing historic figures that are claimed to have been British and black has had all mention of Beachy Head Woman removed. The information that was memory holed recently after new DNA findings showed the skeletal remains to have belonged to a local white woman cited the work of historian David Olusoga. Thanks to the wonders of web cache, the now expunged text can still be revealed. It read, in 2012, archaeologists in Eastbourne began working their way through a collection of skeletons that had been locally excavated from the late 19th century until the 1990s. The skeleton of the Beachy Head Lady, as she was dubbed, was one of 12 sent for radioisotope analysis to determine if they had been born locally. The process revealed her to be a 2nd or 3rd century Afro-Roman who had been brought up in the south of England and had either been born in that region or was brought there very young, possibly from Africa. The radioisotope analysis also suggested that she was well nourished in her youth. The fact that she had enjoyed a healthy diet and was discovered and laid out carefully in her grave suggests that she had not served in a lowly position or lived as a slave. Over a millennium before the British people began their years of distant wandering and empire building, the Beachy Head Lady, the first Black Briton known to us, had lived and died in rural East Sussex. And that's the end of the quote, all of which, aside from the observation that the woman was well nourished, turned out to be false, as my previous video on the subject, linked in the comments, reveals. The fact that the claims were simply deleted rather than featuring a clear correction or retraction is, to my mind, somewhat shoddy, especially from an organisation which receives taxpayer funding. The edited blog entry, linked in the description, now cites John Blank, a musician at the courts of Henry VII and Henry VIII, who first appears in historical records in 1509 as, presumably, the first Black Briton. Although he was probably technically a Spaniard brought over with Catherine of Aragon and her entourage. What knots people tie themselves in order to try to make history fit their narrative. In any case, find out more about the real Beachy Head Woman in my other video, linked in the comments and the description. But that's it for this video. Don't forget to like, share, and most importantly, subscribe. And you can also support the channel on Subscribestar.
So there you have it, the Beachy Head Woman, and the case that was brought to the attention of the globe of the planet and British public about a lady that was found. And I can't understand that this happens to be the first case of 2nd century bones that have been tested, say these are Roman. because the Roman Empire lasted until 476 AD. And very much they occupied Britain. We know that they tried to even conquer parts of Scotland, and that was walled off with Hadrian's Wall. The Picts, and the Picts were described as black people, and later they say, well, they were kind of tattooed and they were white looking, all those stories. But with the video, did anyone notice that the picture of the John the Trumpeter, the black guy in King Henry VIII's court, he had his hand was white, his face was darkened and black, but he was holding a trumpet and the hand was white. We have to question the sources. And some people tried to question even this painting, the Moor's Quadrille, and it said, well, the people riding, the men that were riding were in blackface, which is a nasty comment to even, to make. But if you notice the hands and the legs, you could see that they're exposed. They're covered in some respects, but you would see that between the boots and the pants, there's that skin which is matching the face, which is melanated. In the case of these imagery that's just presented as primary sources, and you see that the trumpeter in Henry VIII's court had a white hand and a black face. We have to look at all sources. Look at Magna Carta, which is falling within that gap period of 1,000 years, 1215. We look at the Norman conquest in 1066, the Glorious Conquest, and you have to shine a light on that, because the Bayeux Tapestry in France, and I'm not going to go into that in this episode, but that's a whole mile long of all white persons depicted in the Bayeux. And I'm saying to myself, if these people really existed in 1066, when the population was barely 300 million, 150 million during the time of Christ, and about barely 300 million in 1066, if that period existed, how come all those persons depicted in the Bayeux Tapestry in France, the Bayeux, and I called them to the museum and they didn't even want to take the calls. But I just say, it doesn't make sense. If you have all those persons that are depicted as white, why don't we have a population that's 90% white, near 100% white today? Why do we have such small numbers as barely 7-8% of the whole planet? And the imagery in the museums, in the Vatican, and of Christ, and everything is painted white and clearly whitewashed, doesn't make any sense. It makes no sense. So it is that there was talk that this lady could be Roman. Well, what does a Roman look like? Did anyone even know and sense what is a Roman and what the Roman looks like? Well, I can tell you what a Roman looks like, because I've been to Wales. And in Wales, I came across this part of the royal castle. And this is not in plain sight. When you visit in Cardiff, Wales, the royal castle, you go into the main gates. And yes, it's an actual castle. But before you enter, there's a gift shop, and you pivot and go to the right. And then there's a basement, you go down, and there are no clear signs to say, well, hey, here's some black folk. Here it is really what Romans looked like. It's not a very big deal. Their eyes are focused on the prize, on the castle. And clearly they have images of white people in that castle in Cardiff, Wales. But underground, in the gift shop, in the place that's not likely you could easily miss, it's such a sight, carved in rock. And yes, you're not probably meant to touch these things, but I couldn't resist. I touched the wall, and the images clearly of black people, of black Romans, large noses and lips. And you can see their whole desire is to mask, to take off the faces of black icons and of stone images. And that is, I've counted thousands of those cases. But here it is, you have what a Roman actually looked like. And I can go on and show you their videos on YouTube. of actual this wall. And I captured similar imagery in my phone. And yes, I mean, you have this really glorious artwork engraved in rock. And it's a sight to behold. It's beautiful, beautiful indeed. And I can just show you, I mean, chariots clearly marked. There are plaques on the wall, Roman soldiers. One nasty and corrupt academic said, well, these images were black clearly, but the current Romans needed support. So they went down to Africa, picked up some brothers, took them back to Wales, and these are the people that got captured in stone. That doesn't make any sense at all. Why don't you have the figures of white people cast in stone? Why are you going to have the help, the supporting cast of Africans that you supposedly scooped up and picked up and took to Wales, cast in stone, which was an honor. I mean, it would clearly be an honor. People have their lives live on in time and across time by being cast in stone. So they would not just, this is reserved for the most honorable amongst the sect and group. You know, they would have that privilege of being immortalized in stone. So let's carry on, and I want to jump ahead and just present something else on another, just pivot. We spoke about the Beachy Head Woman. We spoke about what the Romans looked like, but let me mix it up and throw something in the mix.
Strange early 1900s baby postcards have inspired a bit of a viral trend recently. I may not know much about orphan trains, repopulation or early incubator babies, but I have been collecting fantasy postcards for nearly a decade now, and cards in general for many more. Mummy, Daddy, where did I come from? Many moons ago, before internet search engines and fact checker existed, prudish parents would avoid the embarrassment of talking about the birds and the bees to their awkward, inquisitive kids by recounting a whole host of simple creation cliches that little Johnny Genius conveniently emerged ready-made from a cabbage or was delivered tracks and signed by Stork Express. Fantasy and mythology have probably existed since our caveman ancestors told epic tales round the campfires years before 3D TV existed, helping them find meaning in a bewilderingly chaotic world. But the invention of photography combined with improvements in mass colour printing technology and a fast and cheap postal service. Remember, in those days you often got same day delivery at half a penny. The social media of its time. I will most likely come over this evening. All this and a little bit of Edwardian photo editing wizardry made these collage and photo montage postcards that little bit more real and compelling in a world that still clung to its superstitions. Is it any surprise that postcards like these inspired the surrealists and other creatives to mould and shape the world we know today? Evidently, vintage postcards are still a rich source of creative inspiration for curious minds. Here's a creepy, real human hair postcard. Just the ticket, Choo choo for the next iconic novel written by your cat, or brand new controversial movie to set tongues wagging. Thank you for watching my video, and please feel free to leave a comment.
Now, I'm just showing you something because I just want to mix things up. We're presenting theories, we're presenting primary evidences. One woman who presents so much primary sources on Europe, melanated Europe, is Dr. Marie Charles. And I will play one of her clips at the moment. She has compiled a treasure trove of so much evidence, of prisoner logs, of wills and estates and transfer and property transfer logs and deeds. She has collected crests and memorabilia, iconography, parts of castles and homes to show pins, brooches of black. Even on Facebook, I shared where you have a current royal, Princess Michael of Kent, wearing a black pin, a Moorish pin. There's just so much out there signifying and confirming this black melanated Europe. So this chap presented actual postcards, and people are collecting this stuff. Prior to 5 years, 5 years ago, all this stuff hasn't even come out. Even the revelation by Putin, black icons, a lot of things on the black melanated Europe just simply was not available. A lot of the sources. So I went ahead and bought this book on, cabbage babies, and I purchased it, and it's almost 300 pages of materials and copies of the actual postcards. And this gentleman was showing you some. So in this book here, I have postcards, a book about postcards. And I know it's interfering with the background and you can see it flickering, but you have actual postcards, people writing themselves and showing the some Asian looking, mostly white babies, which part of the repopulation stories. And this is not something that is told and discussed. But I want to weigh in that there are Freemasons that know, obviously, of the truth. Some of them talk to me, off the record. And one, Guy Anderson, English chap whose father was a Mason and he became a Mason, he has something to say about, cabbage babies. Listen away and let me bring him in now on a video.
And the orphan trains, because the point of getting you on, and we've learned so much already, was really just to see maybe where this abandonment comes from. And I'll let you tell the story of the Cabbage Patch Kids.
Right, so you've got the Tartarian Empire wiped out. So we had lots of civil wars. We had lots of catastrophes considered to be natural, like fires and floods. We had famines and genocide, acts of genocide as well. So the population throughout the entire world has been dramatically reduced. The aim being, as you touched on earlier on, was to make out as if the indigenous people and black people were primitive, and that white people were the superior and dominant race that invented and created everything. So in order for that to actually work, they needed to repopulate. So the people with pale skin, they were killed or they were incarcerated. So you'll see after 1776, lots of prisons, asylums and orphanages open. Now, you could be considered insane because your husband died in battle. So let's say the Napoleonic Wars, millions of people are dead, and the civil wars, Russia in particular, you've got a lot of women, a lot of widows with children. Losing your husband in battle was one of the reasons you could be sectioned. The children become property of the state and they start shipping them around, but they need more. They've got to rebuild an infrastructure. These children are going to work on farms, they're going to mine, and then we're going to see the Industrial Revolution. So they're going to be working in factories and sweatshops. So how they go about that, it is alleged, is that they cloned a mass cloning exercise called the Cabbage Patch Babies, and this was spearheaded following a series of short films that were made by someone called Alice Guy Blache, a French pioneer filmmaker who brought out a film called The Cabbage Patch Fairy and then The Midwife to the Upper Classes. And this depicted, black and white movie, this depicted couples going and actually purchasing babies from cabbage patches, demonstrating that they were grown, and following old Slavic folklore that babies come from cabbages and you find them in the bottom of the garden. And that's that. So in plain sight, they're showing you a mass repopulation program. They were then sent through baby farms and through the orphan train movement and distributed all over the world. Some were sent to Australia from the UK. We're told that it was convicts that were sent. It wasn't. The cages are too small. The cages were child size, like puppy crates. So they distributed children throughout the world, and then all of a sudden they were put on display and classed as premature babies in all of the world's fairs and expositions throughout the world as well, and you could buy them. And one of the particular adverts that Dr. Martin Cooney, who started the incubator babies, was that we can grow a 9-month-old baby in 1 week. So they had some serious technology going there, and you could buy them. So children were being taken from their parents, redistributed throughout the world. This was also happening to indigenous children as well. Children were being brought over from Africa. Children were being taken from Native American tribes and families. And these weren't primitive by any stretch of the imagination. They were far more advanced than anybody realizes. So they repopulated. So the mass cloning exercise was called the Cabbage Patch Babies. And a series of postcards came out to promote that. They're also known as repopulation postcards. And that happened late 1800s, early 1900s. So there you go. It's a bit of a...
Wow,
yeah.
it's incredible. So, I mean, the cabbage patches are obviously symbolic of reseeding or replanting, because that's how they talk in symbols, isn't it? They allude to things through things like that. So, and I remember growing up in the we had all the sticker albums of the Cabbage Patch Kids, and you know, all those, and they all took like weird forms. I remember my mum, she wouldn't let me and my sister buy them. Everyone was buying these Cabbage Patch Kids, but my mum must have been tuning into something that was off. So yeah, they're taking all these indigenous populations of children and then moving them around into different areas, different countries, just completely reseeding the planet, the new reset.
Yeah, I mean, in America alone, the orphan train movement, and this is what they state, so you can double this normally, but the official figure is 250 children were taken from orphanages in the streets of New York and distributed across the Midwest of America to work on farms and in mines. So you can double that to 500,000. We were then sending children from Russia, which was really the most heavily populated part of Tartaria of the empire. Children from Russia were being sent all over the place. Ukraine, which was Crimea, all of the children from there were taken. So they'd go in, have a war, take the children, redistribute them, force them to speak English, change their surname, and give them a new historical narrative. This is what happened, this is where you're from, and you're imagining that. And if you didn't comply, you went to a re-education centre, which was otherwise known as an asylum. And they had a lot of child asylums as well. So you've got to think, all of these world fairs, the asylums, the prisons, and the orphanages all pop up at the same time, along with the Lunacy Act, just after all of the civil wars and the atrocities that occurred. And this all happened after 1776. A mass brainwashing and whitewashing exercise. And they have literally whitewashed history, made out that white people are superior, and that the white people were the true forefathers of America, and the people that had the capability and the intelligence to build these incredible structures. It's a lie. It's an absolute lie. It's the other way around, entirely the other way around.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting when you look at the terminology, like minors, like the kids, it's actually the kids, the children that were sent down the mines. It's such a
Good
horrific
spot.
thing to imagine, and you have to then ask the question, talking about abandonment. Surely all of us here, we link back at some point to these generations, these kids, you would imagine.
Yeah, most of us. I mean, it's difficult to know. I did some digging on my family tree, and I found out that my mother's father was originally from Ukraine, Crimea. So it may well be that he was a descendant from the previous civilization, and they were different people to us. That they're not the same as us, and this is why we have.
So again, presenting to you a different take as to history, and for you to decide and determine. Now, let me bring in, we've discussed the Beachy Head Woman. We looked at the Morse quadrille trailer. We looked at the cabbage babies and the reseeding. Let me bring in Dr. Marie Charles. She's my absolute favorite. She has 22 books on Black European history. Just over 5 years, she has been on a mission to tell the story about Black Britain, Black UK. She's lived in multiple European cities. So let me bring her in for her to talk about Black Britain.
Hello and welcome to the Missing Faces in Teaching YouTube channel. Our focus is research into the publications of Black history in its foundational, truest and evidenced aspects. Today, well, before I get into the content of today's presentation, I would like to give a special thank you to all those new viewers and listeners who've taken the time to leave such positive comments. You know who you are. I won't embarrass you by saying your name, but thank you. So much appreciated. Now, today is presentation 3, and it's going to deal with Europe, which is one of my central aspects of research in tying up Britain and France and Germany and Spain and showing those cultural continuities. But I'd like to spend a little bit more time on this opening slide because it will set the tone for much of the names and the surnames and the locations. So, for example, if you look above, you will see the crest on the faces for Henry Conquerant or Conquerant or Conqueror, who was the brigadier of the king's armies and governor of the town of Schelestadt or Selestadt, which is located in eastern France and it borders Germany. It's a very key location and we will come back to that. So Conquerant is French, it is Norman. Below, or that way, you see the crest for the family Ufflem, and they're from Westphalia, which is a region in Germany. And we find that that name migrates into Britain as Ufford, and it finds itself in Northamptonshire and Suffolk in England. Now, its derivative is found to be Ufa or Ofa, and we find that he was one of the rulers of southern Barathanac of Britain in the early medieval centuries. And so we find that the surnames are migrating through Germany, France, and into Britain. The German Ulf would become Ulf, as in King Ofer, the 7th century ruler of Baratanach. And so it's easy to see through metathesis, which is the transposition of letters within words, and umlaut, which are vowel changes, we can see how those words take their form in different geographical locations. But let's have a look at this slide and trace the French origin of the surname Conquerant or conqueror that becomes conquest. Now, we have kind of been taken off course a little bit because mainstream narrative likes to call him William the Conqueror, when the evidence clearly shows that conqueror, conquerant, conquest is a surname. And if you look over to the map, you can see that William Conqueror was born in Falaise in Normandy, and that in southern France there is another region which is related to the same name, called Conquis. I apologize if I'm saying some of these French names incorrectly. But we are able to locate that surname from France as its origin, as it moves through into Baratanach. Now, William the First, or William Conqueror, Conquerant of France and England, has a son, and his son is King Henry I of England. Now, he owned the county of Cotentin in Normandy, which gives us some idea of the immense wealth that this family accrued over time. And so their wealth displayed itself in the stately homes, aka also known as Longshanks. And we know from the last presentation I did that, well, we know that a later European, Patrick McGoohan, played Longshanks, and he looked nothing like the original melanated Edward I, would be given this credit. But we see the father, the son, and the grandfather as a black lineage being retained in history on this particular slide. Now, we know that he was also born in Beaumont Palace, and that Beaumont Palace becomes a very, very important of Marlborough. That's very important. Now, Conquerant, Henry Conquerant, from the very first slide, was the governor of Sélestat in France. Now, utilizing the methodologies of onomastics, we find another melanated connection with the region Sélestat, because the city of Sélestat was originally owned by the mother of the Swabian Duke, Frederick I. Frederick I, or Barbarossa, was a German king, a Roman emperor, and the Duke of Swabia. Now, what's really interesting about this particular ruler from Swabia is that if you look, and this has become a bit of a pattern in a lot of my research as well, that the coin is depicting something very, very, very unique to those individuals who were striking the coins. That if you look very carefully at the melanated image, that embedded within the image are actually three faces. And this is a signature, an element of African culture, that those heads or those ori would become the orisha. And I'm finding a lot of this in the evidence, and here is one example. And the work that I'm doing now on Scotland and France and Germany is showing this particular symbolism. But if you look very carefully, you will see aspects of that on the faces.
Okay. For more on Dr. Marie Charles, you can look and purchase her books on Amazon. I have about 6 of her books already, and you can have the full set of 22 books covering Europe in its entirety. So let's go to an earlier and celebrated Briton, call it Cheddar Man, and let me introduce this to you.
In museums, reconstructions, they look a bit like this guy has a spark to him as well.
I'm Chris Stringer and I'm a research leader in human origins at the Natural History Museum in London, and I'm holding here this wonderful reconstructed head of Cheddar Man, and I've been studying the skeleton of Cheddar Man for some time, and now with DNA technology we've got the whole genome of Cheddar Man. And here we've got a scientific reconstruction of what he looked like. We've got his hair form, his skin, his blue eyes, and that dark skin colour, that combination really striking. And getting out of here information about his biology, the fact that, for example, he couldn't digest milk because that came in with the advent of farming after the time of Cheddar Man. So we're getting his whole biology, how he relates to people in Europe at the time, and how he relates to people in Britain now.
In a very bright light and environment, and then we look like stuffed animal, you know? It's horrible. Horrible. You can die. No, with the heat up, Yeah. Okay. Like Tom. Like Tom, no, this morning, you know what?
This is what people look at the Natural History Museum in London.
And so the evidence that is just being presented, just to show the Beachy Head Woman story, that there is evidence of a certain level of melanation in Europe, in Britain, going back even further than AD 200 to 10,000 years ago. I too want to bring in other things like the Russian icons. Again, in the last 5 years, some evidence has really emerged coming from Russia, and I will just play the clip now.
Pseudoscience.
Looking at these images, what do you think we are witnessing here today? These are authentic depictions of biblical figures, paintings of the very people whose stories are told in the Bible. Just a year ago, the global community was abuzz with reports of posters said to have been found in a secret vault open to the world by Russian President Vladimir Putin. These posters depicted black biblical Israelites and icons. For centuries, Western art portrayed biblical figures as white Europeans. However, ancient icons and artifacts stored in Russia reveal a startling truth. Many biblical figures were black. Among these are hundreds of iconic paintings, some of which are familiar from scripture, while others feature names we've never encountered before. Remarkably, these saints are all portrayed as black, a testament to their true identity. With these revelations, doubts about the role of black people in biblical history can finally be put to rest. These paintings, categorized as Byzantine artwork, hold significant historical value. Byzantine art preserving authentic history. The term Byzantine art refers to artistic works from the Eastern Roman Empire, also known as Byzantium, which lasted from 330 AD to 1453 AD. This empire thrived under Christian rule and left behind an artistic legacy visible in churches worldwide, Particularly in cities like Ravenna, Kiev, and Moscow, Byzantine art spans three distinct periods: Early Byzantine from 330 to 750 AD, Middle Byzantine from 850 to 1204 AD, and Late Byzantine from 1261 to 1453 AD. These works focused on religious themes, using art to reflect the transcendence of the Orthodox Church. Byzantine art adhered closely to its Greek cultural roots and preserved history with unaltered authenticity. When you encounter an original Byzantine painting, you see a direct reflection of history without distortion.
Let me add another primary source.
You know, what a lot of people of color were doing in other lands, because everyone wasn't just in Africa. You know, what they tell us here in these narrative or artistic license schools, TVs, books, everything else. But we were doing lots of good things and bad things too. But I'm going to use these two books mainly. The House of Alpin. The fallen rulers of Scotland, regardless of their blood connection with Kenneth MacAlpin, politically selected another dynasty titles as the House of Dunkeld, House of Canmore, House of Ballet, House of Bruce, and the House of Stuart. The Moorish House of Stuart continued to rule both Scotland and England in AD 1603 until it was succeeded in AD 1714 by a German rule and blood kin of the Stuarts called the Hoveran dynasty.
Martin Lawrence, he's about to go back in time.
Who was the youngest son of Malcolm III. King David I was the great grandnephew of Niger Kenneth Dub. Robert the Bruce, who was the great grandson of David I, became the father of David II, who succeeded him. Bruce's dark-skinned mother, Margaret, also called Marjorie, married Walter Stuart VI and became the mother of Robert II, who became Scotland's first Stuart king. Also, on a side note, King Robert the Bruce's chief lieutenant and friend, Sir James Douglas, who fought in the Scottish Wars of Independence, was called Black Douglas because of the deep black skin. His father's brothers and offspring were also described as having black complexions. That's why we also here in America get the famous Frederick Douglass, who most likely was a descendant of the Douglasses or the Black Douglasses. Now I'm going to look up the name Douglas, the original indigenous Europeans, the Black Douglasses. So looking at the etymology online, the word swarthy means dark color, especially of skin, 1580s. Unexplained alteration of swarthy, 1570s, from swart plus y. Naturally having skin of dark color, or melanin or carbon rich. So basically, the people of the ancient or medieval times were people of color. They were not what you will call white. And the author of this book, Ancient and Modern Britons, David McRitchie, alludes to this. Right here I have the Negro rulers of Scotland and the British Isles. Go to the back of this book, the Gaelic. Show you what the word Douglas means. Black, Negro, Niger, derived from the word Douglas, meaning black or more. All right. Now we have this book, the Ancient and Modern Britons, Volume 1, the Black Douglasses. Let's see. Sir James Douglas inherited the blood of his swarthy ancestors. Now we know or so-called black, carbon-rich, melanated people, whether he was a lineal descendant of the 8th century Douglas or not. Okay? And we know he was. Let me see. As already stated, Goscross remarked that he is said to have seen, excuse me, he is said to have been a black and swart complexion, an expression somewhat stronger than that used by Barber. This dusky-skinned earned for him, said the historians, the title of the Black Douglas. Right? The good Sir James, it may be well questioned whether this title was his particular property. There is indeed every reason to believe that it served no more to distinguish him from the other Black Douglases than the black man would separate one out of a whole tribe of black men. So basically, there's a tribe of different clans in the ancient world, in the British Isles, they was fighting each other, you know, basically. For not only was the good Sir James known as the Black Douglas, but so also was his grandson, a son of Archibald the Grim, and Grim means black or ugly. All right. So apparently was the 8th Earl of this line, who was killed at Stirling in the year 1452 by King James II. All right. Now here we have Grim equals black. All right. Those are the Picts or Moors of Galloway. All right. Thus, as Moors or Scots or Picts, the purest specimens of the Douglas of Galloway were gypsies and Falls, and the Douglas or Lattery, a Black Douglas, was a generic term. Okay. Therefore, for this reason, also a Black Douglas was only a synonym for a Moor. Okay.
Okay, I'm just going to present another final few sources on melanated Europe. I will play the clip now.
Century for anyone to pay attention. They found a stone coffin, a sarcophagus of obvious quality and expense. Inside lay the skeleton of a woman, perhaps in her mid-30s when she died. And surrounding her were treasures, jewelry made of jet and ivory, expensive perfume bottles, ornate grave goods that spoke of wealth and status. This wasn't a pauper's grave. This was someone important, someone respected, possibly even someone of noble or royal standing. The burial dated to around 350 AD, deep in the Roman period. For decades, historians made an assumption. Of course, she was white. Of course, she was Roman nobility, perhaps the wife of a high-ranking official. That's what made sense. That's what fit the narrative. Her skeleton was studied, catalogued, and she was given a nickname, the Ivory Bangle Lady, after the expensive bangles found at her wrists. And then, in 2010, scientists decided to do something that previous generations had never bothered with. They analyzed her bones using modern techniques. They looked at her skull structure, her bone chemistry, her isotopic composition. And what they found stopped them cold. She was African, not Mediterranean, not Middle Eastern, sub-Saharan African. The bone analysis was unambiguous. This wealthy woman, buried with honor and expensive grave goods in the heart of Roman Britain, was black. Carbon dating confirmed she died around 350 AD. Chemical analysis of her teeth showed she'd likely grown up somewhere warmer, possibly North Africa, before coming to Britain as a young woman. She'd lived in York for years, possibly decades. And when she died, she was given a burial that rivaled anything accorded to white Roman citizens. The historical establishment didn't know what to do with this. How could a black woman be buried with such obvious honor and status in ancient Britain? Where was the enslavement? Where was the servitude? Where was the marginalization that the narrative required? The cognitive dissonance was overwhelming. Some tried to explain her away, suggesting maybe she was someone's exotic wife, a curiosity tolerated but not truly equal. But the grave goods didn't support that theory. Everything about her burial screamed equality, respect, integration. And then the discoveries started multiplying. Another skeleton, this one from Eastbourne on the south coast, dating to the 3rd century AD. DNA analysis revealed the same thing: sub-Saharan African ancestry. The Beachy Head Woman, as she came to be known, had lived in Britain her entire adult life. Then, another set of remains from a Roman cemetery in London showed North African heritage. Then another in Gloucester, and another. Each new discovery added another crack to the whitewashed narrative of British history. But the physical evidence was just the beginning. Researchers started actually reading the historical records that had been gathering dust for centuries, and what they found was remarkable. There were written accounts, administrative documents, military records that had been sitting in plain sight all along. One document in particular changed everything. Records of a Roman military unit called the Numerus Mororum Aurelianorum, a unit of Moorish soldiers from North Africa, stationed at Hadrian's Wall. Not just passing through, stationed there for years, possibly generations. These weren't token soldiers or temporary deployments. These were fighting men, North African warriors defending Rome's northernmost frontier against Pictish raids. They lived in the forts along the
Yes, I paused that video because it mentioned the soldiers from North Africa. Notice they were stationed somewhere in Scotland, the Hadrian's Wall that walled off Scotland from England, and that's far away from Wales. So there is evidence of Black African Romans. Let me tune into the words of this Bengal lady and let her tell the story.
I was buried in Roman York nearly 1,700 years ago. They call me the Ivory Bangle Lady. But I was in jewelry and bone. My ancestry traced back to Mauritania, a Roman province, homeland of the Maori, the people you now call Moors. Roman York wasn't unfamiliar with us. Moorish cavalry units, like the Mororum Aurelianorum, had been stationed here before I lived. Some of their children walked these very streets. I lived as a Roman. I spoke Latin, wore fine robes, and worshipped as a Christian. But my skin, my features, and they told another story. I was African, I was black, and I was respected. Today, they ask how I came to be here. But the empire stretched from the Nile to the North Sea. Welcome back to Moorish History TV. I was buried in Roman York nearly 1,700 years ago.
So there you have it. I've presented evidence of Black Europe, Black Britain, and I will let you, as my audience, be the judge yourselves. When you look back at the Beachy Head Woman story and the color change from brown, black to white, you be the judge of the color of Britain, There is so much to be explained, and not even to delve into Cabbage Baby stories, but just what is available on Black history, which can't be explained away. And I leave it there. Thank you for watching. And this is episode 4 of GTR on the Beachy Head Woman story and of Black Britain and Black Europe. Thank you.